Good day. My name is Ruli van der Spey, and I am a translation consultant and exegete in the Russian-speaking world. My paper is more than just a baby boy or a child with a special future. Could a fuller understanding of the noun geber in Job enrich the quality of the translation? Introduction. Mother Teresa was born in 1910 in Albania. Semantically, that is not 100% correct. Agnes Boyagoui was born in 1910 in Albania, but she became known as Mother Teresa. Or saying Pope Francis was born on 17 December 1936 is also not correct. George Mario Bergoglio was born on 17 December 1936, and he became known as Pope Francis. These announcements apply anachronistic information and presuppose it to their date of birth. This is also commonly done regarding other well-known people like presidents and other iconic people. The title or the characteristic of how they became known is anachronistically inserted into references regarding their date of birth. From a literary point of view, we are studying the book of Job to see what kind of person he was and how that influenced the way the author referred to his birth. From a religious point of view, we are asking the question of whether the reference to Job's birth was used as an anticipatory prophetic declaration of who he would become. The study tests the hypothesis that the quality of a translation can be enriched with a fuller understanding of the senses of a specific original lexeme and how it was used in the original contexts. Quite often, translation merely replicate how a previous translation rendered a certain lexeme. 2. Typical interpretation of the noun geber in the book of Job. In this study, all the occurrences of the biblical Hebrew noun geber in the book of Job are examined to establish a fuller understanding of its senses and all the contexts in which it occurs. Since the body of the book of Job is written in poetic form, a comparison with other Hebrew lexemes in parallel poetic expressions also contributes to a fuller understanding of a certain lexeme in either a synonymous or antithetic way. According to Jameson, Job 3 verse 3 is the opening of the formal poetic body of the book of Job. The question that comes to mind is, why did the original author make a cognitive decision to describe a certain person in a certain context as a geber, and not, for instance, as an Adam or an Ish, or in reference to his birth, why was it not stated that an Na'ar, a boy, a lad, a youth, or a Ben, a boy, a son, or a Yelet, a baby, was born? The book of Job does often use the most common word for man, namely Ish, like, for instance, to introduce Job in Job 1 verse 1, NASB. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. If we look at the original, we see that Ish haya ba'eretz Uz. A man, he was in the land of Uz. Just a bit later, when God and Satan had the second conversation, the Lord asked whether he had seen a person as blameless and upright as Job. Here, the Hebrew word for the person is man, is the expected Ish. NASB translates it as follows: there is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright person. Ayen kamur ba'aretz is tam bayashar. There is not like him on earth a man blameless and upright. When Job is introduced in the beginning of the book of Job, the author does refer to his sons and daughters. In this instance, the most common word for son is used, namely Ben. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. Wayaladu, Lu, Sheba, Banim. They were born to him. 7 sons. Stein refers to Job 4 verse 1, where the noun Ish is applied to a newborn, and he states that some interpreters construe Ish in the verse as a male child, but this is unjustified because the text makes no contrast on the basis of sex, or anyway, the conventional way to express a newborn's male sex is the noun Ben. He then also refers to the usage of geber in Job. Granted, in Job 3 verse 3, geber seems to be employed in that anticipatory manner in a similar birth announcement setting. But then that prompts the question as to why that label was not used here instead of Ish. I wholeheartedly agree with the question. It could either be anticipatory or anachronistic. Looking at the reference from a literary point of view, it can be described as an anachronistic insight from the author, since every biography is written after the person has been known. From Job's life, it is clear that on that night more than a mere boy child was born. Even God singles him out to Satan as one who will be faithful even if all his earthly blessings are taken away. That we can see in Job 1 verse 8 and 2 verse 3. Other options for us as believers is that this is an anticipatory prophetic way of indicating what kind of child this newborn baby would be. What influence did the poetic nature of the book of Job play in describing this newborn baby as a geber? Kosmala makes an important observation of how the word geber is used in Job. The book of Job is particularly instructive concerning the changed meaning of the word geber. It deals with the problem of the right relationship of God and finally answers the question of how a geber proves himself to be such before God. Since Job is mostly written in poetic format, the typical feature of parallelism is quite prevalent. This is especially important since most of the instances of geber occurs in parallel structures. Comparing a geber with an Adam, or emphasizing some aspect of a geber in comparison, either in synonymous, antithetic, or synthetic parallel expressions. When the geber quite often occurs in synonymous comparisons, he is compared with a joyful person, a person trusting God. When it occurs in antithetically, it is said that he is not like a liar or an evil person. These poetic parallel structures actually help us to understand which possible senses of the lexeme geber are in focus in any given passage. Van gemeren refers to geber in parallel expressions. The phrase blessed or cursed is the man, the geber, occurs frequently in wisdom statements. In such instances, geber, or in such instances, Ashriya ha-geber may be a poetic synonym for Ashriya ha-ish, like in Psalm 1 verse 1. If ideas of strength are still residual in the nominative, then the reference is to rather spiritual than physical strength. Some of this emphasis on the spiritual strength of the geber is transparent in the frequent uses of the nominative in Job. For instance, Job 3 verse 3, 3:23, and others. Kosmala remarks, it will not help us to a correct understanding of the term geber if we see in it only if we see it only as another word for man. Already in the Old Testament, we have a clearly defined group of statements on the geber, which show him as a man of particular spiritual qualities. The conclusion that he draws is significant. If ideas of strength are still residual in the nominative, then the reference is to spiritual rather than physical strength. This should be shown that the geber is someone with particular spiritual qualities. The ESV translated 100% of the 15 occurrences of geber in the book of Job as man, without any indication that a sense other than a mere man, Adam or Ish, might be in focus in a given context. From the 15 occurrences of geber in the book of Job, the NIV translated geber as follows. Once as boy, strong man, twice, in Job 4 verse 7 and 10 verse 5. Someone, twice, them, once, person, once, omitted, once, and man, 6 times. So the NIV at least recognized that in some context, the quality of the translation can be enhanced by not translating geber concordingly as man, but by explicating the senses in focus. At least twice in Job, verse 4 verse 7 and 10 verse 5, they translated geber other than just a general man or person, namely as strong man. The NASB translated Job 22:2, where the geber is challenged as to whether he can be of any use to God as vigorous man. Can a vigorous man be of use to God, or a wise man be useful to him? The Net Bible indicates the original has another word than the most common word by translating geber as strong man. The Net Bible makes similar choice to the NIV. It is to God that the strong man is of benefit. Is it to him that even a wise man is profitable? Now we're going to speak about Job 33 verse 7 to 9. One of the key passages referring to Job's character is found in Job 33 verse 7 to 9. Here Job is accused by his friend Elihu that he is not acting like a geber. But this very fact is not visible in any mainstream translation. For example, the ESV translation impoverished the well-construed parallel construction that is built into the Hebrew text. Job 34 verse 7 to 9 by the ESV. But man is like Job, who drinks up scoffing like water, who travels in company of evildoers, and walks with the wicked men. For he has said, it profits a man nothing that he should take delight in God. What is not visible is the fact that the word geber occurs twice in this passage. Below, I rewrote the passage by inserting the word geber to show how it was constructed in the original. What geber is like Job, who drinks up scoffing like water, who travels in the company of evildoers, and walks with the wicked men. For he has said, it profits a geber nothing that he should take delight in God. In verse 9, Elihu refers to Job, who is calling himself a geber. And if that is the case, he, Job, should not act like an evil person by being in the company of evil people, because that is totally unacceptable for a geber to do something like that. From these parallel references, it is clear that a geber is seen as a godly person, as someone special who should be held to a higher standard. In his commentary, Kleins discusses Job 34 verse 7 and makes it clear that Job is a man set apart. Elihu has not yet finished citing Job, but now that he has brought himself to utter 2 Jobian sentences, he cannot restrain himself from delivering an evaluation of Job's character. Eliphaz had said in 1516 that humans are naturally disposed to drink iniquity like water, but for Elihu, Job is a man set apart. Was ever a fellow like Job? He gulps mockery like water. More prosaically, was there ever a man like Job who, with his thirst for irreverent talk? The USB Handbook discusses Job 34 verse 7. In asking what man is like Job, Elihu uses Job's name for the second time. Elihu's question is equivalent to, is there anyone like Job? Or what kind of man is Job? Then later on, the suggested glossing of this phrase once again loses what is in the underlying Hebrew text. The irony, the paradox is totally missed and translated out of Elihu's speech. Just imagine how much stronger the translation will speak if it says, is it at all possible that the hero of faith, indicating a man in close relationship with God, will act like that? Is it at all possible? It is impossible for a hero of faith to drink scorn like it's nothing, to blaspheme God if it is just drinking water. In his discussion of Job 34 verse 7, Keel highlights the godly character of Job, of a geber. The attributive clause refers to Job. To drink scorn, blasphemy, like water, is, according to Job 15:16, equivalent to give oneself up to mockery with delight and find satisfaction in it. Why is this important? It is important because this is contrary to the character of a godly person, a geber. The NIV commentary gets a bit closer to the focus of the meaning of the noun geber by realizing this passage is about Job, who is supposed to be who Job is supposed to be. Another description of Job, it is totally the opposite of who Job is, according to the prologue. It is a pity, though, that most commentaries do not highlight or discuss the Hebrew word behind the text that is actually underlying the sense that Carlson is referring to. Mounds refer to the fact that geber occurs 15 times in the book of Job. In his general discussion of the word geber, he indicates that geber is usually translated as man. But in the following detailed discussion, he relates it to the cognate verb and highlights the fact that it indicates strength, not only physical strength, in contrast to women, but also spiritual strength. Blessed is the geber who takes his refuge in the Lord. This is in line with what Elihu is doing. Hartley also confirms that the geber connotes a powerful man. The fact that the geber is a strong person physically but also spiritually is a significant observation of Mounds. He substantiates this by referring to passages like Psalm 40, verse 4, where it is said that the one blessed by the Lord is a geber. Mounds highlights the fact that this is also visible from Psalm 34, verse 8 and other places. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the geber who takes refuge in him. In the classic Brown Driver Briggs lexicon, geber is cited as follows. Geber, noun, masculine. Man, man as strong, distinguished from women, children, and non-combatants. Who he is to defend, chiefly poetic. They, however, do not point out the strength in spiritual relationships or being in closer relationship with God. Job 34 verse 9 also alludes to the idea that the geber is in close relationship with God. But the statement by Elihu loses its edge because it is translated as it profits a man nothing that he should take delight in God. But when it is made clear that it is an oxymoron for a geber not to profit from his relationship with God, The quality of the translation is certainly improved. Now we're looking at Job 38, verse 3 to 4. Gird up your loins like a man. Another example that supports the insight of Job 34, verse 7 to 9 can be found in Job 38, where God is replying to Job, who indicates that he is a geber in good relationship with God. If Job claims to be a geber, then he should get himself ready to fight like a geber, a warrior defending himself against the accusations of God. The NASB translates Job 38, verse 3 and 4 as follows. Now gird up your loins like a man, and I will ask you, and you instruct me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. The strength of the appeal that God is making would be so much stronger if the underlying concept that God is not only calling him to pull himself together like a man, but actually pull himself together like a geber is explicated. I agree with Harvey that there is a higher standard he is called to. In his view, upright behavior has no earthly advantage. Kosmala highlights the fact that Job regards himself as a righteous geber, which can clearly be ascertained from his birth onwards. He is a man, according to his own testimony, that has always lived a perfect life for God from the very beginning. In Job 16:21, Job calls himself a geber. In his discussion of the noun geber, Valentine also refers to the two addresses of God in Job 38:3 and 47. And he appropriately points out that both times God refers to Job as a geber. Both divine speeches begin with the question that challenges Job to gird up his loins and answer God like the hero, the geber he claims to be. Job's friends make fun of him because he calls himself a geber, but he is suffering so much. According to Liu, Job's life is not what a geber's life should be. A geber must be someone in a special relationship with God, a hero of faith, a godly person. According to their worldview, Job should only experience divine favor. This is the standard his friends are calling him to uphold. This now brings us to the next section of this paper, looking at how geber is translated in Job 3, verse 3 specifically. 3. Geber in Job 3, verse 3. I once discussed the hypothesis of this study with a colleague. His very first comment regarding the usage of geber in Job 3, verse 3 is that it is just an alternate form for man because it is in poetic literature. My question would then be, does the fact that geber occurs in poetic literature disqualify the hypothesis that geber could emphasize that Job is a mighty man, a godly person, or does that contribute to a better understanding of what aspect of the word geber is actually in focus? Jamieson confirms that Job 3 verse 3 does fall in a poetic part of the book of Job. Verse 3 is the opening of the former poetic body of the book of Job. Job begins his curses by attacking the day of his birth and the night of his conception. The Hebrew composed of two half lines that are semantically parallel. The verb phrase, let it be, in that day perish, wherein I was born, serve doubly duty. Let the day perish where I was born, serve double duty, since it might also be applied to line B. By not repeating the verb in line B, the poet has more line space in the Hebrew text to extend the birth image. A man-child is conceived. Through his technique of ellipsis, the two Hebrew lines are kept compressed. In Job 3 verse 3, Job curses the night of his conception as well as the day of his birth. In Net Bible 08, let the day on which I was born perish, and the night that said, a man has been conceived. Even though the Net Bible translated geber as man, they showed remarkable insight in a footnote on Job 3 verse 3 by pointing out that translating geber as man misses the point. The word is geber, a man. The word usually distinguishes a man as strong, distinct from children and women, translating which renders this as boy to remove the apparent contradiction of an adult being conceived in the womb, miss the point. This made me realize that breaking from the tradition of how a certain lexeme has been translated is actually very difficult, even though they had the insight that the current translation does not indicate what the Hebrew text is saying. Hartley refers to Job 3 verse 3 and highlights the fact that Job is a geber, a man of strength, a distinguished person who is shamed by misfortune. In this verse, Job refers to himself as a male geber. The several Hebrew words for man emphasize various aspects of his being. Ish, his strength, or Adam, his earthliness and limitedness. Adama, earth, from the ground. But geber connotes a powerful man, particularly in contrast to a child or a woman. In the darkest hour of his crisis, Job refers to himself as a full-blooded, stalwart person. Thus, his curse is not designed to eliminate from the human race a weakling, unworthy of dignity. Rather, he views himself as a distinguished person who has been shamed by misfortune. According to lexicons and most translations, Job 3 verse 3 is the only instance in the scripture where geber carries the meaning of baby boy, a male child. The most common meaning and translation equivalent of geber is man, even though the cognate verb gabar has meanings like to prevail, to be strong, to be superior, like Kosmala said. Klein's comments on Job 3 verse 3. It is doubtful that it has any special overtones of strength, like the verb gabar, be strong, or of a man in relationship with God. It is not elsewhere used of a child, and especially not of a just conceived child. Therefore, what Peake said is highlighting is important. The term geber is looking at what he essentially is, not at the stage of his development he has reached. That's very important. The study of Coetzee confirms that by referring to the noun geber and other cognates of the verb gabar, he describes these cognate forms as derived from the root gabar, which has the basic meaning of to be superior, to be strong. He also describes the adjectival form of the noun in terms of strength and superiority. The adjective gibor, manly, vigorous, powerful. I was surprised that when he glossed the noun geber, he fell back on the typical dictionary gloss, namely man, without referring to any senses of strength, power, or superiority. The non-verbal and adjectival forms derived from this verb clearly carry the meaning of strength, of strong, mighty, manly, vigorous, vital, powerful, warrior, hero, superior, etc. In other words, special in one sense or another. Another example of where Job is described as someone in a special relationship with God can be found in Job 3:23. This is the second reference to Job as a geber. Job is asking, why would God give light to a geber and hedge in his way? This expression is mostly seen as a negative expression. It is unthinkable that God would act like that with someone in close relationship with him. Clients, on the other hand, feels that the hedging is a positive act of God. There was no malice or cynicism in that remark, but a frank recognition of God's protectiveness, thus confirming that this reference to Geber highlights a special relationship with God. Like most commentaries, Barry interprets the phrase being hedged in Job 3:23 as a negative expression. But then he is reminded of a similar phrase in Job 1, and he states, this phrasing is an ironic twist of the Satan's figure's words in 1:10, where he accuses God of putting a wall of protection around Job. In any case, Satan then confirms that Job is in a special relationship with God. He gets special protection. In the theological workbook of the Old Testament, Waltke highlights the fact that a geber is a distinct person. Geber, man, as distinct from such more general words for man as Adam, Ish, Enos, etc. This word specifically relates to a male at the height of his powers. In line with what has been highlighted above, Oswald similarly points out that the geber is more than just a mere man. He is full of strength, at the height of his strength. Geber, man, as distinct from such more general words as man, as Adam, Ish, Enos. This word specifically relates to a male at the height of his powers. As such, it depicts humanity at its most competent and capable level. This is also confirmed by the Strong's lexicon. Word H1397 indicates that the lexeme geber has in its very basic meaning the sense of strength. H1397 geber from H1396, probably a valiant man, a warrior, generally a person, simply. Everyone, a man, somebody mighty. What Kosmala is saying about the geber seems to be quite an appropriate way to conclude the section. Geber does not simply mean a man like Adam or Enos. Or, of course, the word geber also contains the element of strength in the general sense. A geber without power is a self-contradiction. This word is only once used of a newborn male child, but this is a child with a promising future. And this to me is very important. It's my highlighting there. In most contexts in which geber has been used, it emphasizes some aspect of this outstanding person being in a close relationship with God. It seems to be clear that a geber is often someone special, someone superior, someone in a closer relationship with God. One can thus conclude that even though the general trend is to render geber as man, most scholars acknowledge that geber does mean more than just a mere man or a mere baby boy in Job 3 verse 3. This is a child with a promising future. Let us now go to section 4, looking at vernacular examples of how Job 3 verse 3 is translated. The notion, however, that geber in 3 verse 3 refers to more than a male or a male child, a man or a male child, is also not evident in several recently produced vernacular translations. Northern Azerbaijani, which I happen to be able to speak, translated as follows. Kashki man, Jogolan kun Jogolide. It would be good if my day of birth was not there. Oglun oldu, Thailand, Gidje Jogolide. The night they were saying, the sun is born, would not be there. Uzbek. May the day of my birth and the night I was conceived be cursed. Turkmen. It would be good if the day of my birth was not seen. See, a son is born. The day it is said be cursed. Tatar. The day of my birth, a man is born. May that day not be there. Tajik. May the day of my birth not exist, and the night it was said, a male was born. Chechnya. May the day I was born be taken away, destroyed, and the night when about my mother it was said, she is pregnant. It would be interesting to see if the vernacular translation could improve their understanding of the original sense, and whether they could enhance their renderings so that the target readers could have a richer understanding of what is hidden in the original Hebrew text. And I'm finishing off improved quality. As highlighted above or before, Osmala summarizes his thoughts on geber as follows. The book of Job is particularly instructive concerning the changed meaning of the word geber. It deals with the problem of the right relationship with God, and finally answers the question of how a geber proves himself to be such before God. It is most appropriate to conclude with what Kasmala says about a geber. This word is only once used of a newborn male child, but this is a child with a special future. Like Mother Teresa, Job was not known as a special, outstanding person at his birth, but it became known what caliber of person he was. In his biography regarding Job was written, it did not seem out of place to refer to the newborn baby in the story as a geber, as an outstanding person, a superman, a hero of faith, a godly person in close relationship with God. Peake already said more than 100 years ago that the term geber is looking at what he essentially is, not at the stage of his development he has reached. Kosmala confirms that. Therefore, what they say about the geber is quite applicable to conclude with. He's not just a baby boy. He is a child with a special future. Hopefully the quality of the translation will be improved if we can make it explicit that the baby boy called Job is more than just a little baby, a boy child, more than an ordinary person. He is a baby with a special future, a warrior of faith, in close relationship with God. He is a child with a special future, a geber.